young men, Peep game. This is our first ever episode. Welcome. This is new for me. This is new for you. We'll get through it. So let's jump right in. Today is just a quick little intro, followed by a discussion about the word and definition of liberal, essentially. I'll also be going over my own political views and how they've changed, actually. We'll talk about that later, don't worry. And even though my content is not going to be politics per se, some of the subjects I'm going to touch on will inevitably become political. Like if I want to talk about relationships, men and women, I might have to talk about masculinity or femininity, and that gets political very quick, especially on the internet, you know? So I was just gonna come out and show you where I stand politically so that then people can be like, okay. At least we know where he stands, you know? Honesty is the best policy, at least where I come from. And so, yeah, I'm gonna go over all that. We're gonna try to not get demonetized. We're gonna try, you know. This is my first video. Oh God, first video and he's already talking about politics. Well, not exactly. I'm just gonna talk about my politics real quick, promise. And then onto another topic, which will be political, but it will just be a quick rant, nothing much. So if you're drinking, take a drink with me. We're going to talk about my politics 10 years apart. 10 years ago and today. And before we do that, I need to explain first, to those who do not know what it is, the political compass. Now, a lot of you might already know what I'm talking about, but for those who don't, the political compass, instead of having simply one axis, which is left and right, you have a second axis, which is authoritarian and liberal, or if you're on the right, libertarian. So it gives you a 2D grid with left and right, like you're used to. The left and the right have not moved. What has been added is an authoritarian going upwards or liberal going downwards axis. So you'll see what I mean on screen. And simply for those who are not familiar with this, how they explain it is that one is the economic axis and the other is the social axis. Now that's a very great way to simplify it, but the way I see it is more the left and right axis is where you want to go with society. You want to go more to the right, more to the left, like you're used to thinking about politics. And the up and down axis, authoritarian or liberal, is the means by which you accomplish your objective, or left and right would be, okay, so you want to move more to the left, more to the right, okay, that's where you want to go. And how you're going to go there is up and down, authoritarian or liberal. So it does describe the social axis a little bit. Like you want if you're more authoritarian, the social side may be a bit different than if you're like liberal. Anyways, where I was 10 years ago versus today, well, because the political compass is also a test that you can take to find out roughly where you land on the political spectrum. And I took that test probably 10 years ago. Rough estimate, 10 years ago. And I took another one recently, the other day, so I can compare the two. And it's really interesting, honestly, to see your politics change, but in a more direct manner where you can see them actually move, you know? And I was already conscious of this political shift that I have. Of course, 10 years is a lot of time, so the political shift that I went through is not massive by any means, but it's significant, okay? So I'm gonna show you where I was 10 years ago. Around here. So I was smack dab in the middle of the lower left quadrant. That's what I remember so vividly about taking that test, is that I landed perfectly in the center of that green square, essentially. And so that made me a liberal. Some would even say on the internet, a libtard. Where am I now? Well, some of you might see where this is going. This is me when I took the test recently. I lean way less to the left than I used to, and I'm slightly less liberal, although I'm still very decisively in the liberal half, the lower half of that compass, right? So how I explain it and how I see it is that I'm less leftist than I used to be. I'm more of a centrist. The word centrist is sometimes used a bit of as an insult, but of course the people who are there, they don't take it as an insult. They're like, yeah, some of my opinions lean left, some of my opinions lean right. If you want me to be specific, for example, using me as an example, economically, I'm center left. Socially, I'm center right. So those kind of add up to being in the center, but what I am is a moderate, right? So I'm still slightly leaning to the left and also decisively in the liberal camp, but I'm pretty close to the center compared to a lot of people. Let's be honest, okay? What I'm trying to say with all this is kind of a proof that I'm quite neutral. Neutrality is very hard to achieve, of course, but if I'm going to be fair, I am quite neutral in general. What I mean by that is ideologically. I am neutral ideologically. I like to say that I'm a pretty pragmatic person. I try to be as measured and as moderate. Sometimes I'll have opinions that are extreme, at least to some people. It has to be to some people, you know. But generally speaking, I think I'm quite moderate, all in all. You know what I mean? Sometimes I say, oh, you know, the left is right on this point. And then I go like, oh, you know, the right is right on this specific point. You know, so I'll always be like, okay, I can be this sort of arbiter, a sort of referee. I could be like, that's true, that's false, personal foul, ad hominem. You're not allowed to say that. You know, I'm not going to cancel people, but I'm going to fact check people. You know what I mean? But if you ask me my politics, I'm like, you know, I'm slightly liberal. I'm a moderate. I'm a bit progressive. Ideologically, I'm a bit of an individualist because that comes with being liberal. You're more individualist. Who do I support? I don't know. It depends on the candidates, the party. It depends on the country, for example. I'll support different parties in different countries because certain countries need more of this or more of that, more right, more left. So I'll support whoever has the best program, whoever's the best candidate with the best program, essentially, right? Compared to other people, I think it could be neutral on a lot of questions, actually. Of course, if I'm not neutral in the question, you'll know immediately. I'll make it 100% clear that I'm not neutral on this issue. But what I mean is neutral politically, more moderate than I used to be. So I think that's a good thing, right? Being more moderate is a good thing. In a world where there's a lot of polarization, political polarization, I'm going to get a lot of hate for not being either far to the left or far to the right because, you know, especially the younger generation, they're polarizing like mad, you know. I'm now in my early 30s, so I'm like, I'm mature now. I don't give a that much about politics. I care about politics. I'm extremely politically aware, but I'm like, in my country, shit's fine. We gonna be all right. Can you hear feel me? Can you feel me? We gon' be alright. You already know. We gon' be alright. Now, we're gonna talk about liberalism. What it means. What it used to mean. Essentially, what I'm getting at is that when people talk about liberals or liberalism, they mean one of two things. Classical liberal, or the more modern version of liberal. So let's read it out loud. According to the Oxford Dictionary, you have the first definition of liberalism, which is classical liberalism, old school, essentially, version of liberalism, which is a political and social philosophy that promotes individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. So that was the first, the one I call classical liberalism. Now, the other one, the way that Americans view liberals is essentially as leftist. Is that in America, a liberal is most likely a leftist. If they mean a right-wing liberal, they'll say instead libertarian. They both believe in liberalism, but one leads to the left and one leads to the right. The problem is, in the rest of the world, or at least in a lot of countries, someone who is liberal, you think more of a person on the right, or at least center-right, when you say liberal. So in other countries, the word liberal might mean something more right-wing, but in America, it means something more left-wing. The second definition of liberalism, the one that is more modern or more American, is willingness to respect or accept behavior or opinions different from one's own, openness to new ideas. So that first part, I can completely agree with. I'm very open and very liberal in that sense of the word. But the second part is the part I'm drawing your attention to, which is holding of political views that are socially progressive and promote social welfare. So that's the part, even though it sounds good, of course, it's a more leftist way of doing liberalism. Those are the two definitions, classical versus modern, or let's say American liberalism. I identify way more with classical liberalism than modern liberalism. So of course, there's a general disagreement online on what it means to be liberal. If you are referring to the classical liberal rather than the modern version, which Americans try to impose on the rest of the world, or at least when you're on the internet in general, yeah, there's going to be a debate about what it means, but that's what I wanted to bring to you today, is simply to say, yeah, if I say I'm liberal, I don't mean leftist. I simply mean that I want to defend human rights, individual rights, capitalism. Yeah, it doesn't really sound leftist at all. When you say I wanted to defend private property, freedom of expression, a lot of leftist Americans who are called liberals don't believe in freedom of expression. They believe in their own freedom of expression, but not the freedom of expression of their opposition. They want to silence their opposition. So they're not really that liberal, are they? And if they don't support the Second Amendment, they're not that liberal, are they? Or at least in contradiction with the classical definition of liberalism. It's getting late. So yeah, I just want to get all this out of the way in my first video, where I stand politically. How neutral am I really? So yeah, just being less extreme, more moderate. You know how it is. I can't call myself a liberal, at least not on the internet, not when speaking to Americans. If I'm speaking to Americans, of course, they wouldn't understand. Oh, you're a classical liberal. You're not a leftist liberal. That's not the same thing, right? I'd rather you insult me by calling me a centrist than calling me a liberal, okay? Call me a moderate, call me a centrist. Don't call me a liberal. People will get confused. So that's it for today. Thank you if you watched until the end. I don't know how you're still here. That was my first video. If you interact with my video, I'll be so damn happy. I'm just getting off the ground right now. Getting off the ground and take off running. Young men, peep, gang. See you next time. It's getting late. Take a seat. Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey, 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 hey.